Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to open this not open, it's actually open. I'm going to reconvene and reopen this meeting that started last Thursday. It's a live webcast. We have electronic meeting attendance protocols in place, and I would ask that you observe them. This is for people who aren't here, who are on the driving. Don't drive while you're connected to the meeting. And those present, please ensure your phone is turned off, or at the very least on silent. I'll make that sure myself. Check. Apologies. I've asked for those. We have apologies from absence from Henderson and Hills. I don't know why.
And lateness from Councillor Foley.
Foley is late. Baker is here. Early departure. Everybody wants that.
So we're going to move and second that.
Moved and seconded. We approve the apologies from Sandra and Alf. Seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Good on you. Thank you for that. Are there any declarations of interest from councillors?
We're just going to approve the electronic attendance.
Oh, I have to approve the electronic attendance for...
Councillor Foley and Councillor Walker.
Oh, okay. Righto.
We can have a mover and seconder.
Mover and seconder. Quite happy to approve that. There we are. Sayers and Stewart. Thank you very much for that. All those in favour, please say aye. Righto. Righto. Any declarations of interest from councillors? I'm sure there's lots of people who've got declarations of interest in the room, but that's different. Right. We have received several requests for public input. These have been declined under Standing Order 7.7.3. This standing order has been applied to all requests received, and to be clear, no one has been invited to speak, including local boards. For transparency, yesterday I met with the Speedway New Zealand and Palmerston North Speedway Limited to hear their views and understand the differing perspectives. This was a helpful discussion, and I'd like to thank both those groups. I'm not sure if they're here. I believe that staff have reflected what I heard from these two organisations in the updated advice that we are considering today. The time for public input was last week. The reason this meeting was adjourned was for council staff to use the time to confirm and verify the positions of stakeholders whose views were included in the staff report. We're here today to be provided that update as agreed. The declined requests were from Craig Steinbring, an individual, Leith Maskovich, an individual, Ron Kendall, the president of the Auckland Midget Racing Drivers Club, Lance Anderson, Olna Ford, Extreme Drivers League, Jason Jones, an individual, Waikareka Park and the Western Springs Speedway. All have been declined under Standing Order 7.7.3 as it is not appropriate to hear them at this time. Okay, at last week's governing body, in response to advice from the Chief Executive, the governing body agreed to adjourn the meeting while considering the item on investment in Waikareka Park and the consolidation of Speedway. This was after hearing last-minute communication from a stakeholder that was unhappy with the way their views had been presented in the staff report. At Thursday's meeting, council staff provided assurance that between now and then they would get in touch with stakeholders to verify their views. And before I hand over to staff, I want to acknowledge that this issue has a long history and is contentious. Sorry about that. We've all heard and received conflicting and divisive views from those within a community that all like the same sport. I'm sure these conflicting views are represented publicly in the gallery today. It's important that as governors we consider every input, but ultimately it's up to us to determine what provides the greatest value for investment and what is the best solution for the region. I want us to behave like grown-ups today and be respectful of this and not other things. Now, Ponsonby Rugby Club is a separate issue. I acknowledge the presence of Sir Brian in the room. My father played for Ponsonby and was very angry with me because I played for Te Papa, which is actually where Waikareka Park is. So I rather know the areas. We are here to make a decision today, one way or another, about shifting Speedway. So I want us to concentrate on Speedway. I want to just add a couple of little things as background to this. We as a city have to make more use of our existing facilities. Roads, everything has to be made more use of. I have already had squabbles with various rugby league people who told me they couldn't play on rugby union fields. Well, they can't play at the same time, but they can play at different times. We have to use things better. In my view, Waikareka Park is an industrial area which will not have some of the noise problems which have plagued Speedway. And the options, bluntly, as I've read them, is that Speedway moves with or without $11 million. Now, I'm old-fashioned, I'd take the $11 million, but I'm just going to hear from everybody else. I'm sure you've got plenty of opportunity, plenty of things to say. We are here to make a decision today, one way or another. A delay isn't good for any of the options in the sport. So I'm going to hand over to senior staff to come forward. I've got Max, Anna, Bray and Alistair. Would you come forward and make your presentation, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, councillors. As mentioned by the Mayor, we paused the last meeting during questions. So the matter that was before us was a question about whether you wished to approve a request to transfer funding from Tātaki Auckland Limited to the Maungakeke Tamaki Local Board, which is necessary for them to implement part of the Waikareka Park Master Plan, specifically the critical works required to enable development of facilities there, which will enable the consolidation of speedway activities at Waikareka Park. So that's the question you have before you. We have already introduced the matter, and we won't sort of traverse that territory again. We will assume we can recall from last week. The purpose of the adjournment was to enable council staff the opportunity to engage with stakeholders that had been referred to in the report, so that we could make sure we had accurately reflected the perspectives of those stakeholders and informed you of their views and preferences. In the previous report that was on the agenda, we had relied on information we'd received from third parties in presenting views. That isn't our usual practice, and it was proper for us to take the opportunity to adjourn the meeting and make sure we had spoken directly with the stakeholders and could present a balanced and accurate picture of their perspectives. That process was led by Anna Bray, who's to my right, General Manager for Group Strategy, Transformation and Partnerships. We've had a limited time frame to do that, 2 working days and a long weekend. But she led that process, and in a moment I'll ask her to address you on the key findings of the process, and you've received a memorandum which set those out alongside a number of attachments, which includes all the correspondence, letters, confirmations that we have received during that process. Very finally, even with this sort of shortened window to provide you with additional information, we do acknowledge that there is a tight time frame for you to make a decision, and there are a number of matters to deal with. As we traversed last week, that reflects the way in which this matter has come together, at least from Council's perspective. We've gone through those matters. From a staff perspective, there is a decision before you that is open to you to make, and ultimately it's a question for you as a governing body whether you wish to make it. But it's our job to make sure you are as informed as possible. So I'll hand over to Anna to address you on the process she ran in terms of stakeholder engagement.
Thank you, Max, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So the result of the engagement that we have undertaken, as Max says, quickly over the long weekend, is set out in a memo to you. There are a number of attachments to that memo as well, which are in Nexus, and they set out the views directly from a lot of the stakeholders that we engaged with. I do appreciate that you have only received this information right up to leading into this meeting, and as the Chief Executive advised earlier, some of the correspondence was coming in right up to the last minute when the meeting started. With that in mind, I'll take you through some of the key points in the summary memo. So the key summary at the highest level of the stakeholder engagement is that there are very mixed, often conflicting views across stakeholders within stakeholder clubs, etc. So the job for you today is to consider all of the things that you hear from the stakeholder views, weigh them up and balance them. The first thing that we wanted to make sure about when we undertook our process to confirm and verify the stakeholder engagement that had already taken place was to get in touch with those who had provided letters of support to the agenda report that you looked at last week, as that's as one of those letters was what prompted us to adjourn the meeting. So I'll start with Speedway New Zealand. You're aware that during the meeting a further letter from Speedway New Zealand was received, which was concerned about misrepresentation of their view in the agenda report letter. We have met with them, the mayoral office and Auckland Council staff, to clarify the position. The position is that they wholeheartedly support the upgrade of Waikaraka Park, but we're not explicitly consulted on the fact that this would mean the end of speedway racing at Western Springs. Therefore, they could not hold a position on that, and they also could not let the governing body meeting think that that was their position, because their members were getting in touch with them to say that that's how their position was being conveyed. That act of having it conveyed in that way in the officer report was by no means intentional. It was just a misunderstanding of the purpose of what that letter of support was. But we've now clarified with Speedway New Zealand, they support the Waikaraka Park upgrade. They cannot hold a position on the consolidation of all speedway activity at Waikaraka Park and the ending at Western Springs, because as they weren't consulted explicitly on that as part of this engagement, they haven't consulted their members on that, so cannot hold a position. We also contacted Auckland TQ Midget Association, and there is an issue with the letter of support on there. That letter of support is only a reflection of an email from Michael Bruff, from Pack and Send, who is a sponsor of some speedway racing and a sponsor of drivers and cars. That letter on the agenda report reflected an email that he sent in support and reflected his own personal view and that of Pack and Send at the time of that agenda report. It has been clarified that that never represented the view of Auckland TQ Midget Association. Their view is that they do not hold a position on that, but that it is not their view as purported in that letter of support in the original agenda report to support consolidation at Western Springs, at Waikaraka Park, sorry, so we need to withdraw that letter. It is unclear how the letter got onto the agenda in the format that it did, but it is important to say that whilst it reflected the content of a letter to John McCallum, it is not him that put it in that format on that agenda. We are still looking at how that might have occurred, but it's important to note that it was not John McCallum. The other letters of support that appeared on that agenda report, we've contacted the writers or providers of those, and all of the remaining letters of support have had their contents confirmed by those parties. This includes Greenway Racing, Graham Standring, Palmerston North Speedway Limited, and Auckland Stock and Saloon Car Club. The next thing that we did was take the opportunity to get in touch with other racing clubs and teams and fans and drivers that had identified an interest in this issue. So we have reflected their views in the memo as well, and also included a lot of correspondence from them in the attachments that are on Nexus. The majority of stakeholders that we've engaged with would all love to see a future of Speedway at Western Springs. Most of them, but not all, would accept that if it wasn't possible to have Speedway racing at Western Springs any longer, then they would support Speedway racing at Waikaraka Park. Almost all support the upgrade of Waikaraka Park, and the fact that this would enable more categories of racing at Waikaraka Park. But as has been mentioned, there's a lot of different views amongst the stakeholders engaged with. We've also engaged with people that are not part of the Speedway community at Western Springs or Waikaraka Park, but that for various other reasons have an interest in the activity that happens at Western Springs. This includes Eden Park Trust Board, who don't have a position on what happens with the Speedway at Western Springs, but have suggested instead that we talk to rugby clubs that do have an interest in that matter, and we have through the Chief Executive engaged with Sir Brian, who is here today, and also we have sent around a position from Chris Clues from the Ponsonby Rugby Club for you to look at in the attachments, and there's a brief summary in the memo as well. Active, the Auckland Sport and Recreational Trust, has provided a letter of support through Debbie Kurgenvin, which supports a proposal to consolidate Speedway, and that's at Waikaraka Park, and they've noted that funding for investment in motorsport from traditional sources is challenging. I think that I will leave that there, and we are happy to take questions.
Okay, questions, Councillor Sayers, please.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you for the report. I've just got a couple of questions, probably quite high-level procedural ones, because some of the correspondence we've received has been around deficiencies in the entire process, criticisms about tight timeframes, didn't allow enough time for stakeholders to fully consider their positions, including probably running down to the fact some of the members of the public who wanted to present today haven't been allowed to under the execution of a standing order. So from your point of view, how robust and how well could it stand up to scrutiny of, say, for a one of those inquiries that you do around, I forget what they're called. What are they called? Judicial review, for example. That's one question.
Thank you, Councillor, through the Chair. We have set out in the report and in the and in this memorandum the process that has been undertaken, and it includes the engagement that has happened with stakeholders. It is our position that the decision which you're being asked to make is one that is available to you to make. And the process has been sufficient to put you in a position to make a decision. It is always a matter for you as the governing body to decide, fundamentally weigh those questions about whether you consider the process to be sufficient and whether you consider you have enough information to make a decision. If you do, I think that is, I'll leave it there. And if we need further information, we might, we could perhaps hear from legal advisors, but I think that reflects the advice we've received.
That's fine. Okay. Again, this is probably getting a little bit more into detail. Some of the correspondence that we received fairly recently, I just wonder if council could make us aware, council officers could make us aware if they're aware of these concerns or not. And that's one around, we mentioned a Mr. John McCullum, and who apparently acts on behalf of Bruce Robinson in his capacity at both Western Springs and Waikaraka Park. And the concern is that significant pressure has been applied to Western Spring Speedway drivers to give feedback along the lines that he has put forward directly in his communication. So are we aware of that ourselves, other than the correspondence we received in it? And then I've just got one final query.
Thanks, you, Councillor. I mean, some of the information that we received, and it was in the original report, came via John McCullum, and he was doing his role in terms of gathering perspectives and support for the position that he was taking. And I think there's no criticism of that. Of doing that. I think that the step that needed to happen was that the council then needed to go and speak with the stakeholders directly and confirm those positions, which we have now done. And there's no sense that we've had from those stakeholders that there was any duress in terms of the way they were presenting their positions. Anna, do you want to add anything to that?
That's correct. And probably the other thing that I would add is that it is important to be clear, I think, that there is a challenging environment at Western Springs and not a viable operation going forward for that. So being clear about that it's a tough thing to hear, I think. The people that I have spoken with and my team has spoken with, it's very clear that there's a passion and deep emotional attachment to Western Springs, which I get, and that is a hard thing to overcome. But when faced with the decision on would you rather not have open wheel racing or speedway at Western Springs or in Auckland at all, then there was support for moving to Waikaraka Park, but a very hard thing to want to take a position on when that love of Western Springs is there.
All right, thank you, and that's thank you for your candid answer. The other one, just for clarification, really, is around the current promoter at Western Springs. Do they have a memorandum of understanding in place already regarding any move of Speedway to Waikaraka?
Yes, I think that's addressed in the report and was discussed at the workshop that we held on this matter. That's obviously would be expected that if we are proposing consolidation, that we have made sure that the existing operator is prepared to accept and enable the additional classes of racing to happen at Waikaraka Park, and there's an MOU that confirms that.
Great. Well, thank you very much. You just prompted one final question. That's the stock cars versus, I guess, kind of speedway vehicles. It's certainly not an area of my expertise, but in terms of them being accommodated going forward, could you just clarify in terms of perhaps the stock cars particularly? How they accommodate and do they run on the same track and any issues?
The information that we have is that a lot of work has gone in by Tātaki and the promoters and the clubs here to figure out what work is required to happen at Waikaraka Park in order to enable all the classes that currently race in Auckland to continue racing. And, frankly, that's the lion's share of this work and engagement has been focused on that. And we've reached the point that we are confident that that is the case, that all the classes can continue racing. It is fair to say there are some differences of emphasis, I suppose, on that point with some of the stakeholders. But that's the view of the promoters and operators, and indeed I understand that's the case everywhere else in New Zealand except for Christchurch, where these classes race together on the same track and are able to manage the practical configuration that's required in order for them to do so.
All right, well, thank you. I just thought they were part of the reason why I've asked these questions, just so they do get verbalised in the public arena. You'll appreciate. Thank you, Your Worship.
You okay with that, Councillor Sayers? Councillor Turner, please.
Thank you very much. Just a clarification, Mr Mayor, you said that today's decision was about Speedway, but Deputy Mayor said last week when she was chairing that the decision was about the $11 million being transferred to the board to upgrade Waikaraka Park, and that that decision was just contingent to Speedway, us accepting Speedway would be shutting.
Maybe I can answer that, unless I've got this wrong. The $11 million comes from capitalising the $1.2 million a year that we lose in running it there. So that you don't get $11 million unless it happens. Okay?
So that asks the last question, where was it coming from? Where's the losses? The Speedway promoter makes losses on this venue. Is he subsidised by Tātaki? And where's Tātaki's losses that they're saying?
So there are two parts to that question. So first of all, I understand the promoter makes a loss, and they've been clear in the letter they've sent you that they make a loss in terms of their operations in running Speedway, and that was the case with the previous operator. Prior to 2019, they were also making a loss in operating Speedway at Western Springs. That partly just reflects the restrictions that are in place at Western Springs in terms of the unitary plan restrictions, the number of races they can run or meets they can have per year. So they are clear, the operator's clear they don't intend to carry on, given their position was they were fronting up with their own money to enable this to work because they wanted to keep open wheel racing in Auckland. Now that there is a viable opportunity on the table to enable that to happen, that's there for us to take. They're not prepared to carry on losing money in order to enable open wheel racing to remain in Auckland. So therefore it'd be a question about whether there's another operator who'd be willing to do so. So that's the first part of the question around whether the operator loses money. Tātaki's position, and is referred to in the reports, they are clear that they, in terms of their profit and loss, they lose $1.2 million. If you remove outlier years like COVID and other things, in a sort of normalised year, they lose going forward about $1.2 million per year in running Speedway. That's the cost of maintaining the track and other costs related to them having Speedway there, minus the income they receive in terms of licence fees, and that results in a $1.2 million annual loss. And that's I'm just trying to refer to the section of the report so that it can be make sure that's very clear. At paragraph 73, that's where that's the advice we've received from Tātaki. So a normalised year typically operates at a net cost to council of $1.2 million per year. That's just the operating loss. That does not factor in. That does not factor the opportunity cost in terms of what could be, further income that has been foregone as a result of using the venue for other things.
Max, apologies. I was just going to pause you. I was getting an indication from Tātaki.
Tātaki might like to come forward and answer that a bit. CFO, thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, just want to clarify one comment there, and appreciate the complexity around this, but the $1.2 million loss that is referenced in the report relates to the operation of the stadium as a whole. It does not relate specifically to Speedway, but Speedway is part of the mix of activity that results in the stadium operating at a $1.2 million loss. And the report goes on to point out that if we were in a position of operating the stadium without Speedway, that there would be a projected improvement of up to $1.1 million.
Can you give me a percentage right now of that operational cost? What part is attributed to Speedway?
The best response for TAU's position is that the greatest cost to TAU of Speedway at Western Springs is the opportunity cost through not being able to host higher yielding activity. So freed from the requirement to host 12 Speedway events through the peak summer period, remembering that the Speedway schedule is stipulated so that there have to be 3 events in November, 2 events in December, 3 events in January, 3 events in February, and 1 event in March. There is no flexibility in terms of spreading those events in any other way through summer. Impacts significantly on our ability to make the venue available for concert events.
Thank you.
Councillor Watson, please.
Yeah, so these questions are just to do with stakeholder feedback at this stage, so I'll just confine myself to that. I've got other questions to do with other matters that I'll add on after people have had the chance to talk about this. So I guess my first question really goes to this fundamental notion of support or not support. That's pretty much what you've been looking at. So I'd just like, before we start, just to put that in context, have Western Springs Speedway, have they been told that their lease won't be renewed and that there is no future for them at Western Springs? Have they been told that at the off?
When you refer to Western Springs Speedway, you mean the current operator at Western Springs Speedway, the current promoter?
The operator, yes.
I think probably it's best for Tātaki to answer that question.
Chief Executive of
I think
Tātaki is welcome to answer.
the answer, I think, is yes. I think also we're noting the letter from them saying they do not wish to continue.
So to answer your question, an agreement, a 4-year agreement or 4-year license was agreed with Palmerston North Speedway, 2019, I believe. That expired last year. That agreement, at the time it was negotiated, there was an explicit understanding with Palmerston North Speedway that it wouldn't be renewed. That predates TAU. When that point arrived last year, and we were faced with the position with Palmerston North Speedway, we agreed with Palmerston North Speedway that we would extend the licence another year. The reason being that those 4 years were affected by COVID. It had affected Palmerston North Speedway's ability to run their events, and that during that year we would take time to work on what an alternative solution would be. And that is the solution that we are talking about today. It's been jointly worked on as a response to dealing with the fact that the licence that Palmerston North Speedway expires after the season, and that we have not committed to doing anything beyond this current licence period. It brings us to decisions that the only relationship that Tātaki has with Speedway is through the operator. And that those decisions are made by the board of TAU under its trust deed, and that those are the decisions that we are effectively dealing with at the moment.
Okay, so that would explain why the Western Springs Speedway manager then has said publicly in the press that the motorsport was not leaving because it chose to leave, but because Tātaki made it clear Speedway had its day at Western Springs. Given the opportunity, he said Speedway would like to stay at Western Springs under a model where you could have some longevity. Western Springs is and has been ideal for Speedway since 1929. And that Waikareka Park would never be a Western Springs. So I guess my notion is when councillors are getting told that there's letters of support or people are supporting, if they've been giving an ultimatum, as has been the case here, then it's a little bit of a stretch to take that as an expression of support. They feel they don't have a choice. Isn't that a more accurate characterisation of the feedback from that sector of the Speedway community?
So, Councillor, and through the Mayor, I think there is some nuance to this because it is a complex picture, and that's what we have tried to present in the memo and information that Anna Bray has given you, which is that, yes, the majority of stakeholders we spoke with did express the view that they would prefer to see a future at Western Springs for Speedway. And we've made that clear in our memo to you, and that's also, and all the letters that we have included and provided to you, pick up on that sentiment. Most of the stakeholders we spoke with, not all of them, but most of them appreciated to some extent that was not currently viable, and that there wasn't a viable proposition at the moment to carry on with Western Springs. That some stakeholders want the council and Tātaki to try harder to make that possible, and some are expressing the view that even though reluctantly, a reluctant view that ultimately, looking at all these things together, looking at the future at Western Springs, looking at the $11 million on the table to upgrade Waikareka Park, they ultimately think this is the right course for the sport. So it is a balanced, nuanced position. It's not as simple to say they support it or don't support it.
Well, I guess in the past it's been the councillors who have been making that call by way of resolution. Incidentally, and just finally on the notion of ultimatums, have Ponsonby Rugby been told the same thing while we're dealing with this? Have they been told the same thing, that their lease isn't going to be renewed?
Ponsonby Rugby's lease ends in 2027. We have been working through options with them. We've not told them that it won't be renewed.
Okay, so that's a little unusual, because Mr. Parkinson is on camera in the Herald website saying, quote unquote, "We are not interested in extending their lease in the main stadia here." So that would appear to be a little contradictory once again. If I could go to the classes, you've conducted an investigation of a sort into the bits of feedback we received. could you explain to me, please, why Speedway New Zealand letter of support as it appeared in attachment F and the Auckland Stock and Saloon Car Club response, feedback, are almost verbatim the same? Virtually word for word, every single word. So we have New Zealand Speedway, which has raised concerns over the way they've been represented, and we have a feedback from Auckland Stock and Saloon Car Club, and they're the same.
Just to be clear, Councillor, the Speedway New Zealand raised issues around how the report described their letter. They have not in any way raised concerns about whether or not they sent the letter and intended its contents. So the letter is a accurate and legitimate letter from Speedway New Zealand.
So my question is why are those two letters from two separate organisations the same?
Well,
verbatim?
I think I don't know the answer to your question other than I can speculate that they were being supported and asked to provide those letters by the same person, and that is quite an ordinary and proper way of soliciting letters of support.
All right, let's move on to the classes of cars. There's 5 classes of cars at Western Springs, and I think belatedly there has been an accumulation of the responses back from them. So I just want to check I've got this right, because we've just had a whole lot of information dumped on our lap today. So as I understand it, the sprint cars don't have a formal club, but the Auckland Midget Racing Drivers Club, who would have liked to have and denied speaking rights, they support staying at Western Springs. Correct? The F2 Club, they have articulated support of the same. The Auckland Three-Quarter Midget Club has said that they prefer to remain neutral, but have again raised issues about the way they were characterised in their apparent feedback, and that there were concerns with the way that had been represented, and that the Kiwi Kids final one, Quarter Midget Club, haven't conducted a poll, but like a number of other groups would like to stay at the Western Springs if that was all possible. So that's a pretty emphatic response from the 5 classes that use Western Springs, isn't it?
Well, Councillor, thank you for the question. I think each of those clubs is referred to in our memorandum, and we've attached the letters we've received from those clubs. I think the position is again, it's nuanced, and you'll need to read the letters to understand the full picture. At least in one case, I'm just trying to find the reference to, the theme is that, like I said before, they would prefer to stay at Western Springs in a sustainable way if that was possible, but in some cases are supportive of the upgrade of Waikaraka Park to enable consolidation if that is the only possible way to continue racing in Auckland.
Okay. Yeah, okay. We've got a clear notion what the 5 classes have said there. One of the key stakeholders, if not the key one, that doesn't appear to have been captured in any shape or form, and which is actually signalled as a risk in the Auckland Speedway location analysis, page 39, in terms of risks. We are told by the author, if this project fails to deliver or meet expectations, it may have a negative impact on the future of the sport, resulting in a loss of spectators, sponsors and competitors. So I guess given that we have a really clearly identified, viable and loyal group of fans who have been going for time and eternity and who are there 10, 12 times a year, what what has been the feedback from the consultation with them?
So the feedback through consultation, and the key thing is that it's mixed, and then the other key thing is that there definitely is a preference to try and make Western Springs work, but that there's support for the upgrade of Waikaraka Park. In an ideal world, there'd be the money available to do both the upgrade of Waikaraka Park and a continuation of racing at Western Springs. A number of concerns were raised with me and the team that were contacting our stakeholders over the weekend around some concerns, and they include things like if it was to move to Waikaraka Park, the lease would need to allow for open wheel racing, concerns about capacity with having all categories running at the one venue. Also concerns about will spectators go out to Waikaraka Park, and the experience over COVID and other flooding issues where Speedway has been held out there, the spectators did not come. This is acknowledged. It could be very much the case, though, that with a renewed and upgraded Western Springs, that would no longer apply, and spectators might be interested. It's fair to say that there are definitely concerns with moving open wheel racing and speedway out to Waikaraka Park, but it's also fair to say that there's support for the upgrade, and that there's by and large a preference to move speedway to Waikaraka Park if Western Springs is not an available or viable option.
So I guess my question was, what form did that consultation take with the fans, who are very clearly identifiable group? What was the consultation that took place there, given that in respect of the Local Government Act, a local authority must, in the course of its decision making in relation to a matter, give consideration to the views and preferences of people likely to be affected by or have an interest in this matter. So clearly fans are going to be affected. They've got as much of an interest in it as anyone, and I'm assuming therefore that there's some response over the last 6 years that has canvassed their view. I mean, if we take it a step forward, the network of stadiums and venues appear as a schedule of a strategic asset, and it's in our significance and engagement policy. So we're dealing with the stadium. Just a few months previously, every person in Auckland had their say on North Harbour Stadium, every single person. So I ask, what form were the fans who are there every couple of weeks, were they engaged with and their feedback captured as per the requirement of the Local Government Act, and arguably as a logical expectation as far as that stadium being part of our strategic network?
Thank you for the question. So the view of the fans has not been captured by me explicitly and the team speaking with all of the fans of Speedway in Auckland. However, fans that have already been part of the process or provided their views to us are included in your pack. Mostly the engagement, getting the fans' views, has been with the clubs and others that we have engaged with that have conveyed the view of the fans to us.
So can I just want to add to that. So there hasn't been formal consultation undertaken about this decision. I want to be very clear about that. There has been engagement with stakeholders, and over the years, and in the letters and information you've received, there's a number of pieces of information you have which convey the views and preferences of users of Speedway. The provision of the Local Government Act that you refer to, Councillor, does impose a requirement to consider views and preferences. It's quite explicitly does not require the council to consult on matters. So it is a matter for you to consider the universe of information that you have about views and preferences of people affected, which include Speedway users and other Aucklanders who may be affected by this decision, and collectively decide whether you have sufficient information to proceed. The advice we've received is that there is sufficient information from a legal perspective to proceed.
Okay, I guess the point there, without labouring it, is I would have thought an issue that is so sensitive, that has such a history, that has had 6 years to get everything out in the open, including the view of the fans, and have the courtesy of making an explanation to them, that opportunity would have been taken by the council, especially when a few years ago there was a petition, 30,000 people. 30,000, that's no small number, 30,000 people to save Western Springs. So I would say that is a very significant gap in the way this whole matter has been canvassed. In respect then of the situation where we find ourselves in today, I guess we have a position where the choice, or the support or otherwise, is really being presented as something of an ultimatum. Well, that's been confirmed. We're not going to renew your lease. You're going. We have quotes essentially from the entity that operates Western Springs saying as much on multiple occasions. We have a clear preference from the 5 classes of racers at Western Springs saying that they want to stay, and we have, the final revelation that despite everything, and despite the passage of time, and despite, nearly endless opportunities every season, and on which the success of a move to Waikaraka Park depends on a whole number of levels, i.e. people going to watch the sport there, we haven't even canvassed those key stakeholders. So I'll leave my questions on that feedback just at this. I have other questions that go to other matters, Mr. Mayor, that I'll pick up later on, that I assume that opportunity will be made.
Thanks, I do want to let other councillors have a few questions. Councillor Newman's next.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm so torn on this. I wondered if I could have the officers for TAU, just in terms of the financial performance of the stadia for a moment. Good afternoon. Look, can you just confirm the EBITDA performance results for any of your stadia? None of them are particularly good, are they? What is the least worst performing stadia that you have in terms of your EBITDA result?
Go Media Stadium is the best performing of our 3 stadia.
Okay, and so with the change that is supported by the TAU board at Western Springs, are you anticipating a break-even position with respect to EBITDA at Western Springs?
No, we're anticipating still being in a loss, but a small loss.
Okay. So with respect to the proposal for the transfer of the funding for the agreed scope of critical works, the really interesting word in there is the word critical, because I've seen this before. We need to fund the critical works. If the $11 million is transferred, is that full and final? Are you ever going to come back to us to say, we've got a new tranche of fundings required for other works which are not deemed to be critical, but are essential for the operation of Waikaraka Park? Is there stuff which is non-critical, but you'd like to bid for that at a future time?
So I'm not sure that is a question for Tātaki, because while we'll be transferring budget from Tātaki to the local board, this would become a local board project that Tātaki would be managing on the local board's behalf in terms of delivery. the it would be important for the council that if this resolution proceeded, that we followed through and made good on the promise here to make the facility at Waikaraka Park operational for all classes, and because that is the essence of what's being proposed here. We have a high level of we have confidence that the $11 million estimate is a good one to proceed on. It's been looked at by several parties. There is, and I think there will always be, for all of our assets, plans and hopes and dreams to make things even better. And I think the sorts of discussions we've had is if you have a speedway operator here, 35 events, upgraded venue, they've got permission to have 35 events on the energy plan, then they're in a long-term favourable lease arrangement, that's going to put them in a position to be able to fundraise themselves to be able to invest in their asset. And so I think in the future you'd be looking for co-investment rather than direct council investment. The answer, this narrow answer to the question, Councillor, is the $11 million is all that is required in our view to complete the works that have been agreed. There is a possibility that further additional works will be wanted, and in that circumstance where you've got an operator operating successfully with a long-term lease and the ability to utilise the venue well, we would be expecting some degree of co-investment and fundraising, and that's been the sorts of discussions we've had with the operator as well. Is there anything you would add?
I asked that question because the last time we had a conversation about this in 2018, the numbers wobbled and wobbled and wobbled on the day, literally by the hour, and the numbers really expanded, contracted, and it really came down to a definitional issue of what's going to be required. So what I want to know is, frankly, is this full and final? I suspect it isn't, and if it's not, what would be the scope of the stuff that isn't being talked about today? If you can't comment on that, if we're not at that stage, that's fine.
Very happy to respond to that. We have deliberately taken design through to develop design stage, so we have got confidence in the cost estimate. So the 11 million cost estimate provides the necessary upgrades that the Stock and Saloon Car Club and Palmerston North Speedway have identified as being required to provide the capacity and capability for all forms of four-wheeled speedway to participate at Waikaraka Park. There is a long-standing issue to do with the former heritage grandstand at Waikaraka Park that was demolished for health and safety reasons. And since the demolition of that grandstand, Council has provided and been maintaining temporary grandstand infrastructure to replace that lost capacity. That remains a matter that from the Stock and Saloon Car Club's perspective is unresolved, but that is separate to this issue of consolidation and the critical works. For the foreseeable future, that temporary grandstand will provide what is required.
Okay, look, I've got a couple more questions, but I would have to say it really depends on if the ratepayers might not view it in that context. But can I just ask them, in coming to this discussion today, is the Board of TAU firm in its position that it doesn't have an intention of continuing with a proposal which would require the maintenance upgrade of Western Springs for Speedway?
Sorry, could you just ask the question? The board is...
Is the Board of Tātaki, coming to this discussion today, firm in its position that it would not support your organisation investing and maintaining Western Springs for the purpose of housing Speedway?
Vicky Salmon, the chair, is here, so I may defer to her, but what I will say is that it is a commercial decision around the cost to TAU of not proceeding with this decision is commercially disadvantageous. It's certainly, there is no intention to continue to incur losses, and on that basis, if no decision was made to upgrade Waikaraka Park, there still remains a question of how you address the 1.1 million gap that you would otherwise fill through the move. So there is at the end of the day, it is not economic, or it is less economic to move Speedway to move to Waikaraka Park.
But I accept that, but it's on the continuum of EBITDA results for Stadia, none of which are economic. But I think Vicky Salmon, you wanted to comment?
We would not invest in Western Springs for Speedway. 12 nights do not make sense. The investment required does make no commercial sense, and for the sport, I think it doesn't allow it to go forward, and I think we will have to recognise that.
And just a couple more questions, if I may, Your Worship, but probably that's all for TAU at this stage, but it's the officers with respect to the presentation of, how we got to this point from the resolution in 2018, if I may. So the report appears to lean in heavily on the Stadia Strategy Working Group discussion. I've been part of that. I don't... Can I just get some clarity here, because that group has never resolved issues around a future home for cricket. I know that there was a heads of agreement between council and NZ Cricket for NZ Cricket to go to Western Springs. That is obviously not in the running. We actually haven't resolved, we haven't even got the SOSA matter resolved yet. That was part of the statement of intent. We had the statement of intent, and then we overlooked that when we went to the Stadia Strategy discussion. So can I just get an understanding? The report relies heavily on that Stadia Strategy Working Party discussion, but we actually don't have a landed position with respect to the previous discussion around what would happen at Western Springs, for cricket and Ponsonby Rugby yet, do we?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. I don't think that the intention of the report was to rely heavily on it. The intention was to traverse what had occurred, and the working group was one thing that had occurred which related to the resolution, but it hasn't, as you rightly point out, resolved itself, or resolved all the questions referred to in the previous resolution. I suppose the point to make here is that since 2018, a number of different discussions have taken place about Stadia, including discussions with the Eden Park Trust Board. I attended a meeting of the Eden Park Trust Board last night and spoke with them about this proposal, and that's referred to in the memorandum, and that included representatives from cricket that were present at the meeting, and they took essentially no position. As you rightly point out, the previously, the discussions about Speedway were linked quite heavily to discussions about the future of cricket in Auckland, and that is no longer considered to be the case by the council, by Tātaki, or by Eden Park. So that link is, which made Eden Park sort of central to this conversation, is no longer there, and that was the case in 2018. Is no longer the case today. I suppose the key point in the report is a number of things have happened since 2018, which relate to that resolution. And it's available to the governing body to decide whether to proceed or to defer again.
My final question, Your Worship, because in 2018, there's probably only 2 councillors in 2018 who really displayed too much interest at that stage about a Waikaraka solution. One is Councillor Bartley, who has always been very consistent in this space, and I credit her. But in 2018, the discussion was about a move from Western Springs to Collindale Park. That is absolutely off the table now. The script has changed, and now it's Western Springs to Waikaraka. We are no longer talking about Collindale in any way, shape or form for Speedway.
That's correct, Councillor. I think one of the key differences between then and now is the process that Tātaki have undertaken with the sector to undertake that location analysis and to develop up all the way through to the design stage, a plan which is supported by the promoters, and that is a different context than we had in 2017-18.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lee, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be brief. The way this discussion and the narrative around this proposal has been constructed is very much focused on consolidation of Speedway. In other words, the removal of Speedway from Western Springs to Waikaraka Park. And we're told we're just meant to focus on that. I think even the Mayor kind of alluded to that. So it's all about moving Speedway. In fact, really it's about a technical decision to transfer $11 million to the Maunga Kia Tamaki Local Board. I wonder how that aligns with our responsibilities under the Local Government Act when it comes to decision making. And the question is to Mr. Hardy, who is a lawyer, and I'm referring to section 76 to 82, I think it is, under the Local Government Act. That's the act that each and every one of us swear to uphold as a condition of becoming a councillor. So it's a solemn oath by each and every one of us around this table, the elected people around this table, that they're obliged to uphold. So I won't go through them all. There's quite a few of them. However, I want to talk to, I think it's, where is it? Okay. Just excuse me, there's so much of this stuff. I'll refer to the extent, I think it's 79.2, and the question is Mr. Hardy, the extent to which the nature of a decision or the circumstances in which a decision is taken allow the local authority to scope and apportion the opportunity, I beg your pardon, the scope and opportunity to consider a range of options or the views and preferences of other persons, because there are other persons involved in this decision, and it's not just about $11 million. The implications are that the cost would be a lot more
to get Wairarapa Park up to scratch, to consolidate Speedway, which in itself is technically difficult. So, in your view, is this the report, and all we have in the report is essentially a undisclosed higher and better purpose for Western Springs? Is the report, in your view, consistent and compliant with decision-making responsibilities for the elected people under the Local Government Act?
Thank you, Councillor. I do need to clarify, in case I get in trouble from the Law Society, that I'm not currently a lawyer. I was previously a lawyer. I'm still admitted, yes. The answer to your question is yes. We believe that it's open to you to make the decision. I would refer you to the essential nature of parts. I'm going to become a lawyer all of a sudden. Basically, the essential nature of Part 6 of Local Government Act, which is what you're referring to, is it sets out standards that apply to decision making, and then it leaves it open to you as decision makers to decide how best to give effect to those principles. And that recognises that there's a democratic context here, and that decisions will often happen in a way that isn't perfect, but you know that the time frames in which decisions are made sometimes require expeditious decision making and require democratic judgment to be exercised by elected representatives, and that's the context in which you have to make those judgments. So you have rightly referred to some of those responsibilities that you have, and we have traversed in our report the process that we've gone through within the time frame we've had available to put you in a position to make a decision, noting the limitations of that process.
Just a follow-up question, one follow-up question. In clause 21 of the report, which you're one of the authorisers of, there's a reference to finding a higher and better use for the Western Springs Stadium, and it also notes that a number of the proposals that are under consideration are incompatible with ongoing Speedway operations. We don't know what those proposals are. We've never been told. We should be told, I would have thought, if we are to make decisions as required under the Local Government Act. But why do you believe, you must be aware of them because you've alluded to them, why do you think these proposals are assumed to be higher and better?
Thank you, Councillor. I'm not aware of them. What I am aware of is the EOI process and which was public and listed on GETS. That has been taken, the Tātaki is undertaken, and I am clear that decisions about that ultimate use of Western Springs will be decisions that will need to be made by a governing body, and that you will need to be fully informed of relevant matters before you make those decisions. So the context today is that, you know, we've gone through the reasons why this matter has come to you within the time frame that it has, because there's a very narrow window of time to make a decision to enable this to take place before the next season of Speedway. It's a separate matter from deciding the future of Western Springs, which will certainly come before you at the appropriate time.
That's not really an answer, so thank you.
Okay, Councillor Walker, are you out there?
I'm absolutely out here. Can you hear me okay?
Go ahead. Yes, we can.